Welcome back. Let's see what Dara's got to say in his latest podcast.
First thing I wanted to talk about is there's a assembly in Castlebar at the weekend, and it is a group of people who wish to come together to discuss topics and listen to speakers regarding mass immigration, uncontrolled, unvetted mass immigration into our country. Now, we've seen that the opposing side, the college fascists, have begun to organise they call a counter-protest, and they intend to disrupt a lawful assembly. So they are currently using electronic means to deprive those people in Castlebar of their natural, civil, European, and UN rights of association. And that is completely illegal. That is a conspiracy right there. And that doubles the punishment when you conspired with others. And it's even extraneous again when you use electronic means. So because you have a right of association, and it's a natural right, it's under the UN, it's under the EU, it's in the Constitution, it's there. It's in every republic, the right of association. It's fundamental to a republic, the right of association, the right of assembly and association. Because to associate, you have to assemble, right? So these guys are conspiring, and they feel emboldened because they've gotten away with it for so long. But I know one of the people there is an extraordinarily capable man, and I tried to give him a ring earlier on, but he's busy. So I wanted all you guys to hear this anyway. So the people there, or anybody going to the event, actually, yeah, that's true. Anybody going to the event on the assembly on Saturday, I think it is, in Castlebar, is entitled to notify the Gardaí of this conspiracy to deprive you of your natural, civil, UN, EU, Irish right of assembly. So if you go there and those people show up and you've already informed the superintendent and the chief superintendent that of this conspiracy, then if they cause any kind of disruption to your lawful assembly, if they cause any reason that you guys can't communicate with each other in an efficient and effective way, they have committed a crime, and it's a very, very serious crime to deprive someone of their civil rights. So if those people go there and cause you disruption, they're disrupting a lawful and peaceful assembly. And this is the bedrock of our republic. These people, you hear this, it's a threat to the democracy. Well, we don't live in democracies. Democracy is a mechanism of conducting an election or a referendum. We live in a republic. That's what we live in. That's the important part. A national republic. That's what we live in. Don't mind the democracy. Democracy is just a way of running elections. So if these people come and try to undermine this republic, they're under very serious legal jeopardy. But also, if the Gardaí weren't to show up at all, if there was no Gardaí, even though you had notified them that there was a conspiracy to disrupt your civil rights, but let's just say no Gardaí show up, and you're attacked, everybody who disrupts your assembly is liable to criminal prosecution, and the superintendent and chief superintendent are liable to malfeasance charges. And that's just if the Gardaí don't show up.
This is interesting, yes, because it's an assembly as opposed to a protest. So I suppose if you're going to protest something, your audience is the outside world, or the audience is whatever it is you're protesting against. But an assembly doesn't have an audience. The audience is the assembly itself. So it's people gathering for their own purposes. So if I'm having a family party in my house, and invite people to the party, then that's an assembly, and it's nobody else's business outside of the house. The priority is what happens inside the house. The celebration of whatever it is, somebody's birthday, let's say, or a birth, a christening, for example, or in this case, it's an assembly for the local people to come together and meet and discuss among themselves the issues in the town of Castlebar, in the county of Mayo, in the constituency of Mayo. So it's not a protest. So this whole idea of the extreme left of protesting a protest, or a counter protest to a protest, this excuse that they have. Well, how can you counter protest an assembly? Can you do that? And to what? Then obviously, because the right to peaceful assembly is guaranteed in the Constitution. If you disrupt the assembly so the assembly cannot continue, then it's disrupting an assembly as opposed to counter-protesting a protest. So it's possibly you're onto something there, Dara. Let's see what else you've got to say. Could be onto something there.
If the Gardaí do show up and they allow your event to be disrupted, allow your lawful assembly as guaranteed by your UN, EU, Irish Constitution, natural rights, the whole lot. It's the bedrock of republicanism. And they allow those people to continue to disrupt your event, then not only are they guilty of malfeasance, but they are also guilty of aiding and abetting. They're aiding the people who are disrupting your event. They're providing them a platform. They're providing them security. So if you go to that event in Castlebar on Saturday, and there is another crowd there, and they're causing your event to be disrupted, your assembly to be disrupted, then what I suggest you do is get photographs of every single Garda present, every single one, anybody that even looks like a Garda, because there'll be undercover people there too, and inform them that if they don't stop the ongoing crime, i.e. the deprivation of your civil rights, that they will be liable to criminal prosecutions. And because what they're doing is outside the remit of a Garda, because what they're doing is not covered by their declaration of their duties and their customer charter, they're not supposed to be facilitating other people disrupting your lawful assembly. So because it's outside the duty of a Garda, they're also liable to civil prosecution. And that goes for the super and the chief super. And it's very important in this case that you write to the chief super, because the chief super is up in Ballina. I think the chief super is up in Ballina. And Ballina is one of the most corrupt stations outside of Dublin. It's just shocking what goes on up in that town. So it's time we demonstrated the power of our natural rights. And when there is no right of protest, and there is no right of counter-protest, and if the Garda or somebody else says that there is, ask them to show it to you. Ask them to show you the right of protest. Where is it written down? Because it's not written down. The only thing is written down is how to restrict protests. And you're not protesting.
It's an assembly.
That's not what you're doing. Because a protest is about stopping something. It's the same as an arrest and a protest. It's to stop something from happening. So when you're organizing your assembly, it's very important that you paint a picture that is positive, what you're trying to achieve. So you could have an assembly to discuss mass immigration. You could have an assembly to discuss proper immigration control. You could have an assembly to discuss any positive proposal. You're discussing something. You're listening to speakers.
I've always said that the more important purpose of the protests, the nationalist, populist or populist protests that we've seen over the past 3, 4, 5 years, is the assembly aspect of them. The fact that people are getting together in person, getting off the keyboard, getting out, potentially meeting other people. And if you go to these protests and you don't meet other people, either you're a fed or you're missing an opportunity to network, because that is the bigger opportunity. Because look at where we are now compared with, like, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, because I put that down to people going on protests and exercising that muscle, practicing the muscle of getting off your backside and going and assembling, peaceful assembly, peaceful, what's the word? Just meeting with other people, getting to know other people, seeing that you're not on your own, establishing those over time. You establish trust. You see the same faces. You talk to them. You see that they're not a fad. You get a sense of who they are as a person. You know you're not on your own, and then you're starting to create a team. So moving from isolated, atomized individuals on your keyboard, and of course the whole environment of being on your keyboard doesn't tends to accentuate divisions, differences, and whereas meeting in person tends to accentuate what you have in common with other people. That's just a fact of life. That's the way, the difference between the two things. So it's more because you have that effect, the forgiving effect, or of meeting in person, tends to help people to focus on what they have in common rather than what is different. Whereas on the internet, it tends to go the other way. So, like, that's a great effect that only happens in person. So it's all the more important to really see the importance of the assembly. And Stephen Kerr has done that. He's rebranded this as an assembly. Fantastic. And okay, protest carries. Assembly is better than protest for so many reasons. Number one, protest has the can give people the false hope that's the problem. If you go on this protest and enough people turn up, the problem is going to be solved. Now, it could potentially happen, but usually it's not going to happen because the government and local county council, your county council or your government or your Department of Education or whatever it may be, is not going to listen to a protest. Those politicians are only going to be worried if they're about to lose their seats. So it's, if there's a political movement coming behind or on the backs of the protest that's going to remove them from their seat, then they're going to worry. But if they don't see that happening and they see people putting their faith in the protest only, then they're sitting pretty. They're happy. Yeah. If people are going to the protest saying, "Oh, well, we're not political. We're not interested in political protest. We're just protesting," then they're smiling at you. They're laughing at you because, right, okay, they're actually doing our job for us. They're telling people not to be political. And we're only concerned as a TD, as a county council. I'm only concerned about the political because it's only the political that's going to oust me. It's going to make me lose my seat and lose my power. And these people are saying that they're not political. In other words, they're saying we are not interested in power. We're going to do this protest, but we're not interested in having any power. And so, in effect, the protest is pretty much toothless. Okay, probably have to edit this a bit. So yes, keep going, keep assembling. That's the important part. So that's one thing that a protest, when assembly is more powerful than a protest, it doesn't have that false hope. Second, it's about dialogue. The assembly is about dialogue. The protest is about 50 or 100 or 500 people all saying the same thing. So there's no dialogue involved there. Okay, well, of course there is, but there will be, of course, because there'll be shades of different opinion at the protest. And third, it gives that legal cover that it's an assembly, and if it gets disrupted, then it's a constitutional right that you are that the disruptors are attenuating. And yeah, so let's make them assemblies as opposed to protests. That's great. That's great what Stephen's doing there. Well spotted, Stephen.
You're forming your opinions. This is how the public opinion is being formed. Whereas on the other hand, they do fit a protest. They are trying to stop you. So they have no rights to do what they're doing. They're the ones, and this is what it will come down to if they were ever to ban protests some place and some other place. It'll come down to what you were doing there. Were you trying to stop something from happening, or were you trying to make something happen, to get something to happen? Because if you were trying to stop something, they could characterize it as a protest. They potentially could characterize it. That's not guaranteed. But if those people show up there on Saturday to disrupt your lawful, peaceful assembly, they are committing a very, very serious crime. And if they are aided and abetted by Gardaí, you have to prosecute everybody. So I'd suggest you guys get maybe go undercover yourselves. Get photographs of everybody. Everybody anywhere. You don't know what'll be useful. And I'd suggest pooling those photographs. And I'd go a step further.
Yes, I've been thinking about this. Having a repository whereby you can put up photographs by constituency, for example. Yeah, so of suspected feds who go to protests, guards, so that everybody who's a nationalist in Mayo can look at that at the Mayo subfolder or subforum on a forum and see who the rogues gallery, who are the rogues gallery, who are the Gardaí that the heavy-handed Gardaí in Mayo, who's the heavy-handed Gardaí in Tipperary, who's the heavy-handed Gardaí, and local nationalists can get to know these faces. Now, of course, they might ship them in from elsewhere. I don't know to what extent that's going on. But yeah, there needs to be a lot more naming and shaming going on. Of course, all peaceful, but naming and shaming is, of course, peaceful and totally constitutional. It's holding to account. Great.
And for me, what I would also be doing is publishing the photographs and show the people of Castlebar who it was that facilitated the mass immigration of unvetted criminals into our country. It's very important that it will be very important to some people in the west of Ireland who it was that facilitated the rape of their daughter, or the mugging of their son, or the theft of their car. Some people are going to want to know, and some people are going to want to take those people to courts themselves. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, lads. If anybody has anything they want to say about that, now is your chance. So anybody out there listening to that with the ability to prosecute, have at it, please. Have at it. And that's another thing too, guys. I do post a lot of solutions on here. I try not to pose problems. There's an odd time I have to pose a problem, but I try to pose solutions. And one of the big solutions I'm going to propose today is that you get your ass down and register to vote. Because if you're not registered to vote, whatever chance you had of the rest of us carrying some kind of political campaign, they're bringing 100,000 migrants into our country every year. And those people have the right to vote in local and elections. So on one hand, we have people deregistering their vote. And on the other hand, they're bringing in thousands of migrants, hundreds of thousands of migrants. So the chances of, a lot of these deregister people, they say that if there's less than 50% of the electorate is actually registered to vote, then the vote is invalid. Now, I've never seen that written anywhere. I've never seen the evidence of that. I've heard the claim over and over again, but I've asked for the evidence and I've never seen it. But even if that was true, there's no way you can mount a campaign to get 100,000 people deregistered between now and any election, this year, next year, the year after. It's never going to happen. And in the meantime, they'll have brought in 250,000 voters. So, I used to say, well, the deregister people, they could register for 2 weeks before the election and deregister again 2 weeks after the election. I'm not saying that anymore. Go and register to vote, because you're getting outnumbered. And the fraud is occurring in the election, but it's occurring before the vote. It's occurring, they're not allowing us on television. They're not allowing us into the mainstream media. They're censoring us on social media. They're sending vote reminders on the day of the vote. They're sending vote reminders to the people on social media who have been searching for the side of the argument that the government prefer. That's their search box. That's what they like. That's what they share. So they know that this person is on that side of the argument, on their side of the argument. And they get reminders over and over again to go and vote, over and over again, and they're tracked. Whereas on the other side, on the contrary side, they send you the best cat videos all day. They send you the best YouTube videos all day. They keep you busy on the internet and keep you away from the voting booth.
And they keep you busy with nonsense like deregister your vote. Consider that that's a lot of that is a containment operation, state-sponsored containment type operation. Well, it might not be the people doing it, but the sources of information that are put out there. Because as Dara says, there's no base to it. Nobody has been able to show him the document. This fiction of if you get enough people to deregister, then it invalidates the whole system. I mean, it's not even clearly expressed. You know, okay, even if it did bring down the current government, you still have to put up a new government somehow. And how are you going to do that without people registered to vote because presumably even if that thing did work, that it could bring down the government if enough people didn't vote. There has to be some sort of like national debate and decision taken about what's going to replace it. And if you're deregistered, you're not in that debate. So it's wrong on so many counts. It's a load of baloney, at best stupidity, at worst fed operation. I say fed in the loosest possible. That could be Irish state intelligence, British, American, combination of all of the above.
And fill you with stories of negativity and futility, you know, all day long. How this didn't work and that didn't work and this is corrupt and that's corrupt. All day long, they'll give it to you and you won't go and vote. When really what you should do is go over to your neighbour's house and pile them all into the car with you and bring the whole bloody lot of them with you down to the voting station. That's what you should be doing, you know. So I'll leave it at that today, lads.